Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. During our conversation, you will notice words and phrases appearing at the bottom of the screen. After our dialogue, stay tuned for a follow-up segment called What'd You Say?, where we will explain some of the difficult slang and cultural concepts that you heard. A complete list will be given on our website for the conversation with today's date. For now, let's welcome today's guest. I'd like to welcome to our studio today Andrew Gill. Andrew is the manager of software application engineering at Dematic Corporation in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Andrew, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for the invitation.
You bet. So when you walk into any room in this country, people think, this guy kind of looks vaguely American. And then you open your mouth and they say, oh, you're not from here. Right? Is that charming or is that annoying to you?
I think for most of the time it's, I wouldn't use the word charming, but it's certainly, it's pleasant. Normally the reaction is very positive. It'll be, hey, I like your accent, where are you from? The typical, what I would say, American interest in an accent, which is ironic because an American in England typically wouldn't be asked that. It would be known that they were an American, but the English reserve would kick in and you would just know it without asking it. So in most cases, the reaction is very, very positive.
So the British response, if you pointed it out, it's sort of like pointing out a flaw or sort of saying, hey, you've got this funny thing going?
I think the English are just much more reserved about it. And my wife, who's American, from Grand Rapids, when we lived over there, experienced the same thing, but in reverse. I mean, she has a very strong Michigan accent. It's obvious she's not from England.
There is a Michigan accent, by the way.
Apparently there is. I don't have it yet, I'm told. I still have my original accent. So instantly recognizable that she was American, but people just typically don't comment on it.
Okay, okay. Do people ever ask you to perform British English?
Sometimes. I mean, normally they're pretty polite about it. It's often when I will say a strange word, and by a strange word, a word that is prevalent in English, but not in American English, and someone will do a double take. And so even the chaps at work these days who've known me for a long time, I'll say something and they'll tell me, "You said what?" And then I'll say it again, and they'll chuckle about it.
So, for example.
Schedule and schedule. I think most of the time I use the American pronunciation schedule now, but every now and then I'll slip into the English pronunciation, which is schedule, more of a sh, and they'll notice it and they'll comment on it. My two children as well, who were both born in England but now speak with that Michigan accent, they'll tease me sometimes. I'll say, "Come on, it's time to go upstairs." Certainly when they were younger. Time to go upstairs and jump in the bath. And they would say, "No, Dad, you've got to say," and they would say the American pronunciation, which when I say it is bath, which sounds like a sheet. So the two of them would be doubled up in laughter. Ironically, water is the other one. And sometimes I'm quite self-conscious at restaurants, even today, asking for water. Because I can't say the American pronunciation, which in my mind sounds more like water or...
Yeah, it's an sound.
Yeah, so I just ask for a Diet Coke and it's fine.
or sparkling. Yeah,
that's right.
Club soda.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. So in talking about geographies, there are all these words. There's United Kingdom, UK, there's England, there's Britain, Great Britain, there's Britannia. Are these all the same?
No, they're not. It's actually a very topical conversation because Scotland at the moment is trying to remove itself from Great Britain. So essentially, on the mainland, There is England, there is Wales, and there is Scotland. That's known as Great Britain. Then across the water, there's the northern part of the country of Ireland is Northern Ireland, which is part of now the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So on my passport, it says that I'm a citizen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain.
Or UK.
And Northern Ireland, which is colloquially known as the UK or the United Kingdom. So people tend to identify themselves with coming from England or Scotland or Wales, but they'll call themselves British. That's typically how we do it. And certainly in terms of Olympic teams, it's normally the British Olympic team. However, when you go to the World Cup, you have the English. We don't necessarily need to talk about how well they perform. And rugby's the same. You have an English rugby team, a Scottish, a Welsh. So it depends.
Okay. So how does the rest of the world feel about that? That England gets special dispensation, like they get to compete as themselves, and Scotland does. But in the Olympics, they have to all sort of pool together.
Do you know? I don't think it really matters, and then probably arguably by grouping together we have a stronger team. So I don't think it really matters. The Olympics only happens once every 4 years. Whereas the rugby and the see, I'm calling it soccer now. I've already broken it.
Okay.
And the football, happens much more regularly. So.
Mm-hmm. Except the World Cup.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So now your kids were born in the UK, as you said, but came to the U.S. Fairly young. So they sort of got with parents with a foot in each culture. They're sort of British American kids or American British kids. What makes a kid British or what makes a kid American?
It's a great question, Alan. So I'm going to wind the clock back a little bit further to when I first met Kathy, my wife. I met her in San Francisco. And I don't know whether it was the first day that we met, but sometime fairly soon, she described herself as Irish. So I looked and said, a couple of things wrong here. A, you don't sound Irish. B, you don't live in Ireland. C, you've never lived in Ireland. How can you call yourself Irish? And then I get the lecture on the Irish roots and all the rest of it, and thought no more about it. So then we moved to the United States with the two children, both born in England.
Were you married in England or in?
We were. We were married in England. Kathy and I lived there for 9 years, and then both the children were born there, so had British passports, but also American passports because of their American mother. And then I don't know how the conversation started, but one day we started having the conversation about the children and passports and whether they were American or whether they were British. And then it dawned on me. I think I understood why Kathy was describing herself as Irish, because to me the two children are, well, I suppose in fairness, they're probably half English and half Irish, if that's the roots. But this understanding that you can be American, but also have still a very strong link with whatever culture or wherever you came from. I mean, in this case, they were born in England, but I'd probably like to think that my grandchildren would indicate that they had some link to England as well.
But over time, if you stay in one country, over generations, those connections tend to diminish here in this land of mongrel mixing of all kinds of nationalities.
Yeah, but I think it's one of the differences I do notice is that, and I'll just use the term, Americans here living in this country still seem to have a stronger link with their heritage from another country. But perhaps it's because it's more prevalent. English people are typically have not come from somewhere else. I mean, there's obviously a form of immigration, but my family, from what I know, has lived in England forever. So there was never any thought of us coming from somewhere else. But I better understand it now, having two American or British or however we describe the kids.
Sure. Are there common misunderstandings or common misperceptions of the UK that you would like to clarify?
There's some really good cooking in the UK.
So don't
knock the cooking. You may have to go looking for it, and there's certainly not what I'd call the wide variety of the chain restaurants that you'd find here in the United States. But I would put any good English restaurant up against any good American restaurant any day.
Well, I think what gives both of our cultures, you know, that added interest in cooking is all the immigrants who come in. So you get a lot of Indian, Pakistani cooking, for example, and you know we've got a lot of Mexican cooking and other influences too from immigrants.
Yeah, and certainly a lot of great Chinese restaurants in England, a lot of great Indian restaurants. There's a couple of good ones here in Grand Rapids now, which is good. So the cooking. We don't all know each other. It's still a very large country, and no, I don't know Mr. Smith who lives in London. But I often
you get that
But
question.
I often get asked that. It's obviously a relatively small country, but a lot of people still densely compact. Now,
50, 60 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't all know each other, and it still really is a struggle to get from one end of the country to another in one day. So if you're a tourist, and I often get asked this question, well, you know, can we start off in London and just, you know, go up to Scotland for the day? Well, you could, but you're basically going to spend all day in the car.
Hundreds of miles.
That's right.
Yeah, sure. So Americans tend to fly their flag a lot, and maybe you've noticed that. Do Brits fly the Union Jack very much?
Not as much, no. And I should probably correct you because it's the Union flag. It's known as the Union Jack.
So it's
actually most people call it the Union Jack. But having served in the military, it's really only a jack when you fly it on board a ship.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Union Jack, yes, but not as much as over. I mean, here you see it. I mean, driving here this morning, you see it in front of the bank. You see it in front of a lot of establishments. You'll certainly see it at formal residences of the Queen and places like that. But no, you see the Stars and Stripes a lot more over here.
What do you attribute that difference to?
I think it's I think in a way we almost the British almost take it for granted.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a lack of pride. I think Americans as a whole have a much, I don't want to say need for identity, but I see a lot more Americans wearing shirts with logos of associations or clubs. And I think it's akin to perhaps wanting an identity, whereas I think British people just take it for granted. We're British. We may be English or Welsh, but we're British, and the flag is there and has been for hundreds of years.
So it's no big deal.
No, I mean we're still very very proud of it on certain occasions, and we still certainly in military terms pay the same respect to our Union flag as you would to the Stars and Stripes. But it's an interesting observation. You're right. We don't see it as often.
Okay. Well, now I hadn't advised you of this ahead of time, but we're going to actually have a little quiz on the show today. This is called Name That Americanism. So I'm going to give you 10 British English expressions, and then you get to say what the American English equivalent is.
Okay.
So if I were to say, for example, lorry, you would say?
Truck.
Okay. And if you got it correct, you would hear a bell. And if you got it wrong, you would hear the buzzer.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll start off with an easy one. The letter Z.
Well, I'm going to call that Z. Well, in American, you call it Z.
Okay. Congratulations. You got one right. So the second one is trainers. Americans call them?
Probably tennis shoes.
Good. Or sneakers.
Sneakers, yeah.
Also, great. And it sometimes depends on the part of the country. Yep. Okay, good. A little harder one, maybe. Ticket tout.
Scalper.
This guy's very smart. You've been here a while.
Right, yeah. And I'm married to an American, so it does help.
Oh. Solicitor.
Probably an attorney or a lawyer.
Or, okay. Judges, we have reconsideration on that?
Okay.
Yeah. Attorneys more formal, lawyers more common. Yeah, absolutely. But there's no distinction other than that. So, biscuit.
Biscuit, you call it cookie.
Awesome. Agony ant.
Oh my goodness, agony aunt. No clue.
Advice columnist.
Oh, okay.
So, but if someone says that in a British English conversation, you know what that is?
Oh,
Or-
absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's somebody you write to when your life is in agony and...
Yeah, typically you see it in teenage girls magazines. Some of the national newspapers will have there'll be an agony aunt where you'll write into. Yeah.
Okay. Braces.
Braces. So you're using the English term. So over
Yes.
here you would call them suspenders.
Awesome. Candy floss.
Oh my goodness, on the tip of my tongue. Cotton candy.
Super. The loo.
Typically you call it the restroom or the bathroom.
Okay, or the toilet.
Okay.
But but that's actually that's that like dirty piece of equipment.
Yeah,
so
I was always told
Americans
that-
are very euphemistic about those things.
Well,
so
that's interesting.
Sometimes the washroom.
Okay, yeah.
But you're not going in there to
No.
wash. You're doing something else.
Hopefully you wash your hands afterwards.
Yeah, preferably, right? Sure. Okay, the last one. Joe blogs.
Joe blogs. Oh my goodness, Joe blogs. Joe blogs is just any type of general person. What's the name over here? You wouldn't call it a John Doe. That's more of a dead body.
Often, right.
Yeah, no.
Mr. So Joe Blow.
Joe Blow, yeah, you're right.
Does it sound familiar?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you're right.
Okay, we needed to give the buzzer. So I think we got 8 out of 10. So that's not bad.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
Good. So
And that's very much an American thing, a high five.
High five. Well,
I can remember
we
the
need to-
first time somebody held up their hand like that to me
Sure.
for me to do a high five,
Sure.
and I.
So we're drawing to a close, but I wanted to ask you, what's one thing that for you really works in the U.S. that you just this is a good place to be. I like this aspect of living here.
I think the sense of service, and I think it's one of the things that the Americans often highlight when they go to England. Not that people are rude, but it's a very service-oriented society.
Customer service.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an example?
I think just the way people treat you in stores and outlets, and people are much more understanding. If you have a complaint and you go in and address it, they're going to do something about it, and because they want to right it. In England, that's not necessarily the case. You often go away feeling that you probably shouldn't have complained in the first place.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to have to wrap up today, but I want to thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking with you about our two sister countries, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
No, much appreciated.
Okay, you bet. So, for folks back home, join us for our segment called What'd You Say? During our conversation with Andrew, you heard him say chaps. This is a British English expression which means guys or fellows. So when he was talking about the chaps at work, he meant the people that he works with. You heard me say mongrel mixing. Now the word mongrel means a type of dog with many different breeds. So when you hear this expression, it sounds slightly insulting because it implies a kind of impure heritage or ethnicity. But given the immigration patterns of the United States, it really makes sense because with so many inputs from so many nations, we are a kind of mongrel mix. For other unfamiliar expressions for you from this conversation, you can check out the explanations on our website for the section called What'd You Say? Can you imagine what it would be like to drive a taxi cab for 10 to 12 hours a day? And what if you didn't speak English very well? I think the hours would get very boring. Well, one entrepreneur in New York City has come to the rescue of thousands of immigrant cab drivers with an invention called Xeno Radio. The idea is to connect U.S. immigrants with radio stations back in their home countries. The beauty of Xeno is that the only equipment that's required is a person's cell phone. Zeno customers can program their phones to receive faraway broadcasts from Egypt, Morocco, Somalia, and Senegal, just to name a few countries. 100 of the stations broadcast in French. For many homesick immigrants, Zeno gives them a feeling of being back home. The broadcasts aren't necessarily special, but just hearing some normalcy in the form of familiar music or news reports can relieve the stress of being separated from one's homeland. Zeno operates on even simple, inexpensive cell phones, and it's cost-effective because most cell phone users have unlimited data and calling packages. Zeno founder Baruch Hertzfeld says subscribers can access 2,000 or more stations. It earns money from advertising and investors, and it makes a few cents per call from telephone routing companies with space wanting more business. Immigrants working in solitary jobs and feeling culturally isolated can feel a little less lonely these days, thanks to Zeno Radio. As we've discussed on previous shows, one difficult aspect of learning a second language is adapting to humor that involves plays on words. They are also called puns. The appropriate way to receive a pun when it is told to you is to pretend you didn't think it was funny. You might stare at the pun teller or even let out a groan. We don't want to give punsters credit for clever wordplay, but usually we end up smiling or even laughing. Here's a clever wordplay that most Americans would chuckle over. The question is it funny to you? Two cannibals are eating a clown. One says to the other, "Does this taste funny to you?" Was this funny? This joke involves a common English expression. If you didn't laugh, check out our What's So Funny webpage for the explanation.